Well, welcome back. This is part 2 of Sam's 81 Daytona 500, and as you can see, things have gone completely sideways. During the spark plug removal and doing the tune-up, decided to check compression, and we ran into a problem on number 3 cylinder. Number 3 ended up at 65 psi of cranking compression, which is not good. All the other ones were in the 120 range, which is normal. You usually want to be over 100. Usually you can average somewhere around 120 is what most of these 301 turbo engines have for cranking compression. And of course that's at sea level. It does change if you get into elevation. So in the process of doing that, we put air down the cylinder, both valves closed and piston at top dead center, and we had it coming right out the intake manifold. The turbo wasn't on the engine at the time. So we had a good rush of air coming out the intake. Started to investigate more, pulled the valve cover off. We actually went and took the rocker arm off to see if maybe the valve was being hung open. Didn't change anything. Then I went and removed the valve spring just to kind of see if something wasn't right. And it was blowing air down the cylinder, blowing air out of the intake manifold pretty good. I ended up taking my bore scope and actually was able to feed down the intake manifold and through the intake runner to cylinder number 3 to see the backside of the intake valve. And that's when we noticed that it was actually, we had combustion that was coming up past the intake valve. You can see a spot on the intake valve itself, and actually holding the valve closed with the camera on it, you could see a sliver of area that was not sealing to the cylinder head, to the seat. So with that said, we contacted the customer, and he said, just pull the engine, let's just reseal everything and we'll just check everything over really well. What I'm really curious to see is whether or not the valve tagged the piston, because I put the camera down the spark plug hole after going down the intake manifold and seeing that the valve wasn't sealing. I thought I saw a witness mark where it's possible that the piston touched the valve. Now, normally that doesn't happen. I'm curious if it did happen, how it happened. The only thing I can think of is maybe the valve was stuck open and somebody tried to start the car and it came up and hit it. I'm not sure, but we're going to do some investigating. So we're going to get this engine apart. We're going to get the cylinder heads off, and we'll see how much farther we have to dive into it. Hopefully the cylinder walls and everything like that are in good shape, and it's just, hey, let's get the heads, a valve job done on the heads, but we won't know until we dig into it. So we'll get started on that, and we'll tear it down and show you what's going on. Moment of truth. I'll try to catch some of the push rods if I can. I think I cut them all. All right. Well, I got the valve spring off, but oh, the O-ring's still on it. All right, let's see what this valve looks like. We'll put it on the bench. Yeah, there's the spot. Now let's see what the piston looks like. Actually, let's look at the head. I don't see anything out of the ordinary. I mean, other than the seat looks okay-ish. This is the moment of truth. Yeah, what is that? That looks, does that not look like a witness? It's 30 over.
Yep. This one is too.
Yeah, it's 30 over.
Yeah, you
Holy
can tell where the
crap.
valve kissed it.
Yeah, they're marked L for left side, and the other side will say R for right side. Wow, somebody went through this motor. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, that definitely looks like it tagged it, didn't it? Yeah, unfortunately, this car ended up snowballing into a much larger project. It was not intended to be that way. This was supposed to be, do some bolt-on modifications, get it going, and make it a good running car for the customer. So as you can see, this engine was already rebuilt, and I was kind of suspicious of that to begin with when looking over the rest of the car when it first came in. There was a lot of hardware on the engine that was incorrect or came from the hardware store. They weren't factory bolts and so on. And I had pointed out a few areas that parts were missing, like brackets for the turbo and stuff like that. So I knew somebody had been in it once before. And, sure enough, after pulling the cylinder heads off, we saw that it was 30 over. I didn't record some of the rest of the engine being tore down. We decided to take the engine fully down, inspect everything, have it sent over to the machine shop to be hot tanked and cleaned out and prepared for um, uh, new gaskets and seals and so on. And again, we'll give it a nice coat of paint in the correct color. But upon teardown, everything else looked pretty good. That mark on the piston that I thought was a contact point with the intake valve, most of it had rubbed off. It didn't really look like it um, made a deep impression in the piston itself. I think it mainly made an impression into the carbon that was on top of the piston, and it could have been from me too, from taking the valve spring off. Maybe pushing the valve down and so on. But the um, once we flipped it over and started taking pistons and rods out of it, bearings all looked to be in really good shape. The one thing that looks kind of odd was the balancing that was done on the crankshaft. Just about pretty much all the rebuilds that I do, my machine shop always ends up taking weight out of the crankshaft through drilling or whatever. This one here has weight welded into it, which I kind of question. Not sure what they were trying to do there. Most of the time, your aftermarket pistons end up lighter than the factory piston that was in it, and usually that would require, I would assume, it require removal of weight, not additional weight being put into it. So while it's at the machine shop, that stuff's going to be double checked to make sure that the balance is correct, and what they did is a safe and secure method of balancing it. My concern with adding weight is that if the weld is not uh, got good penetration and holding whatever slug of material you have in there, the rotation of the crankshaft, it could sling one of the weights out, put it through the oil pan, so on. So that's kind of my concern there. But we're going to have that all double checked and just make sure. We're actually going to look to see if they can, if there's room to hone the cylinder walls for forged pistons. Um, Thanks for watching, guys, and then we'll definitely be shooting more video when the engine gets back, get it all back assembled, and then continue on from there.